started. If you're not a member of the commission, could you please turn off your video and mute yourself? And if you're presenting to the commission, we will call upon you when that takes place, and then you can unmute yourself and turn back on your video. And that's just to allow us to have the commissioners, the way Zoom works is it prioritizes video. And so then the people on the commission will actually be on the screen prioritized so that we can see each other. So thank you very much. And thank you so much for so many people from the public being here this evening. So we'll call the meeting to order of the County Charter Review Commission. And with that, we're going to go right into the roll call.
Sharon.
Here.
David Anderson.
Here.
Bill.
Here.
Janet.
Here.
Kyle.
Present.
David Dellendorf is excused. Paul.
Here.
Jane. Patty.
Here.
Tony.
Present.
Richard.
Here.
Liz.
Present.
Bob.
Yo.
Kevin. Olivia.
Here.
Maureen.
Here.
Anne Marie.
Here.
And Tom.
Here.
Thank you all.
What's that?
Wonderful. With that, does anybody have any questions or additions or changes they'd like for the April 7th CRC minutes? And if not, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes.
I so move.
Second.
Wonderful. See a motion in a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Wonderful. Okay. We are going to move forward with our agenda, and I appreciate us being so efficient on those first two items. And we have Lisa here from Fairvote, Washington. We're going to go into, we have two presenters here to talk about ranked choice voting. And just to remind folks, this was an issue that was discussed by one of our subcommittees. And there was actually action there to not move in this direction. But we felt that it was important to have a full conversation with the CRC because we had so much citizen input at our town halls that we held. And so with that in mind, we've asked for two different people to present to us today on their experiences with ranked choice voting and what it can mean or not mean for San Juan County, some of the pros and some of the challenges as well. So Lisa, if you could unmute yourself. And Lisa, do you have a deck for us today, or are you just going to be speaking to us?
I do. Thank you so much, Commissioner Ranker and members of the Charter Review Committee for making time tonight. We do have actually 5 of us here tonight, and there will be 2 separate decks. We'll be very respectful of your time. We've practiced, and I hope we'll be very efficient. We look forward to time for questions and answers at the end. And our presentation will be in 3 parts. The first portion, Kit Muehlman and Alex Semino-Hurt, 2 volunteer speakers with Fairvote, Washington, will be presenting just a general introduction to ranked choice voting of the sort that we do to the public in a regular way. And then we've got a special speaker tonight, our policy director, Colin Cole, who volunteers his time with us. He'll be presenting options available to San Juan County if they wish to consider this. And then for Q&A time, I'm going to be joined, Colin and I will be joined by John Devon, who's a resident there in Orcas Island and knows quite a bit about this issue. I want to also just again send our appreciation. All of you, we're learning so much about the work of charter review commissions around the state. This is not the first charter review commission that's requested information. We've been working in Clallam County and Clark County, King County, and others. And we just are so appreciative of what it takes to do this thorough review. So thank you much. And with that, I'd like to pass the mic to Kit Muehlman from Bellingham and Alex Semino-Hurt from Skagit County. And they're going to take it away for the first part.
Thanks, Lisa. And thank you to the County Charter Review Commission for inviting us to talk about ranked choice voting. So I have some slides to share, if I can have permission to share. And I'm Kit Muehlman. I'm from Bellingham, Washington, and I wasn't very politically active until after the 2016 election. And I was so upset by the toxic tone of politics that I wasn't able to sleep. And then I remembered my brother telling me about ranked choice voting, and I understood how that could change so many things for the better. And I've been volunteering to bring ranked choice voting to Washington ever since, and sleeping. So I'm doing this so that I can sleep. So, and with me is Alex Semino Hurt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alex Semino Hurt. I'm over here in La Conner. And different from Kit, I've kind of always been interested in politics to some extent, but I didn't really start to pay attention until 2000, when Al Gore, a distant cousin of mine, lost the election, even though he won the popular vote. This seemed kind of strange and undemocratic to me. So subsequently, I've paid closer attention and really observed politics becoming increasingly vitriolic. And in searching for solutions to maybe fundamentally improve the tenor of our politics, I learned about ranked choice voting, and I decided to dive in and into establishing it here in Washington and in my local community of Skagit.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Let's see, here we go. Okay, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so let's go look at our agenda for today. We wanted to kind of keep it really clean and simple. So thank you again for allowing us some of your time today. Kit and I are really excited to provide this primer on ranked choice voting and hopefully answer any questions you may have as well. So today we're going to be talking to you about, really what is ranked choice voting, and in the process you'll get to try it out and learn some of the benefits. And then later, Colin Cole, as Lisa had mentioned, our policy director, will outline some of those options available to San Juan County to adopt ranked choice voting. And then finally, we'll, of course, allow time for Q&A. Now, as we do this presentation, if you have questions that pop up, which I always do, feel free to enter them into the chat as we go along. And if we can, we'll answer them. Otherwise, we will certainly address them at the Q&A at the end.
Thanks, Alex. Okay, so whatever our background, wherever we live in Washington, most of us believe that Americans should have a say in the decisions that affect us all. And now Washington State and San Juan County are already national leaders in holding safe and accessible and transparent elections. And there are some ways we can do better.
So let's start with a problem we see a lot in our primaries here in Washington: vote splitting. And here's an example. This is the 2016 state treasurer race. And in this race, more than half of voters wanted a Democrat, as you can see. But not even one Democrat made it onto the ballot in November. So why was this, Kit?
Well, the Democrats split their votes 3 ways, and the Republicans split their votes 2 ways. So Davidson and Waite were the top vote getters, and they went to the November ballot, but that left more than half of the voters without a candidate who represented their values on the November ballot. So whenever similar candidates run in the same race, they punish and weaken each other, and they all lose. So vote splitting hurts both parties. In our recent primary for lieutenant governor, conservatives split their votes between 7 candidates, while Democrats only split their votes between 4 candidates. So the top 2 vote getters, Leas and Heck, were both Democrats, and they were the only 2 who advanced to the general election, even though they got less than half of the vote between them. The majority of the voters voted for someone else, and more than 40% of the voters voted for a conservative, but there was no conservative option in November.
So as you can see with our current system, we as voters feel pressure to cast our vote for one of the top two frontrunners rather than voting for a candidate we actually like best. And we do this, of course, so we don't waste our vote. The same set of pressures, of course, drives candidates to drop out so they don't split the vote within their party. And third party and independents really don't even stand a chance.
So here's something else. Our current voting method wastes people's votes. Remember this election just over a year ago? A whole bunch of these candidates dropped out after we'd already started mailing our ballots in here in Washington. And if you know someone who voted for one of the candidates who dropped out, just wave your hand.
Well, if you're one of those folks, of course, you had lots of company. Nearly 400,000 Washingtonians cast their ballot for a candidate who dropped out right before the election. That's more than 25% of the votes that were wasted. With ranked choice voting, these voters could have listed a backup choice. And so their vote still would have counted if their first choice had dropped out. And in 5 states, I should say 5 other states, they actually did use ranked choice voting in this election: Alaska, Hawaii, Kansas, Wyoming, and Nevada.
So polarization, it's growing in our country, even though more than 40% of Americans don't identify with either of the two parties. Our voting method drives voters and candidates into one of two corners. So in election after election, all we get is a limited binary choice. And this polarization of politics leads to gridlock and dysfunction. It drives the wedge deeper and it renews the cycle. So we're looking for a solution.
And of course, this shouldn't be a surprise. We feel that ranked choice voting can really provide some aspect of that. So what is ranked choice voting? It's a simple change to the way we vote. It gives voters a stronger, more nuanced voice in our elections. With ranked choice voting, you can rank candidates in the order you prefer them: first choice, second choice, and so on. As you can see here, our voter ranked snow first, rain second, and hail last. And you might be wondering where sunshine is on this, but in the Pacific Northwest, of course, sunshine typically lives outside of this district, although right now we're getting a lot of great sunshine. So let's give it a try.
Okay, so I wish we were in person. We'd be sampling desserts and then ranking them. And perhaps we will someday. But in the meantime, we've prepared a dessert election. Alice is going to put a link in the chat for this election so you can try out the voting method and dream about desserts. So when you click that link, you'll get a ballot that looks like something like this. And what you do is you rank something. In the first column is your first choice. This voter ranked oatmeal cookies as the first choice. In the second choice column, brownies. The third choice column, Toll House cookies. And last choice for them was Devil's Food chocolate cake. So they're not a cake lover. So please go ahead and click the link in the chat and pull up a ballot for yourself. And we'll see what the Charter Review Commission wants for your next in-person meeting. Okay, let's see.
I can't believe more people don't like brownies. There it goes.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to find. Are you watching the results come in? So if you'll close that out and we'll all look at this, we'll all look at my screen and I'll talk about the results and see what we get. This is not the right election. Let's see. You can see my favorite thing are desserts. There we go. Oh my, let's see, what have we got? Oh boy, this is
This is juicy. This is interesting.
Well, like brownies. Okay, we've got 16 votes for brownies, 9 for chocolate cake, 5 for oatmeal raisin, and 3 for Toll House cookies. Okay, this may be over quick, but in a ranked choice election, we're looking for a candidate to cross this halfway mark, which is the green line on the right. And I think the votes have all come in. So we brownie is very ahead, but they're not to the 50% mark. So if we were all standing in the line with our desserts in hand, we'd look around and see what is the shortest line. And that would be the Toll House cookies. And sadly, we're going to have to eliminate Toll House cookies as a candidate. And the people who are standing in the Toll House cookie line are going to walk over to the line of their second choice. And everyone else stays in the line of your first choice. So we're in round 1 now. And I'm going to click this arrow on the right and go to round 2. And oh my goodness, all the Toll House people went to brownies. And so now we have a winner. It's over 50%. Does anyone have any questions about that? How that works?
I would just say I'm in the wrong group.
You're in the wrong group. You want
Oatmeal.
Yes, it's let's see, where am I? Here we are.
Why does the chair get to vote 5 times?
You know, this particular app won't let you vote more than once. It's really something. Yeah. If you had a different app, it might, you know, just being a computer app. Anyway, so let's go on to the benefits. Alex?
Sure. So now that you've had a taste of ranked choice voting, let's talk about kind of what happened here. As we saw, the voters who voted for Toll House cookies as their first choice, they still had a say, and in fact they had a very important say in the final count of this election. So voters could, they could vote in this case. We all got to vote. And really, you didn't have to be concerned about whether it was your favorite candidate that was the front runner. You got to really display your true preferences. And then you had a backup choice. So looks like the voters that made a very big difference in this one were the Toll House cookie folks with their second choice votes.
Interesting.
So maybe let's talk a little bit about some other benefits of ranked choice voting. First and foremost is that ranked choice voting gives you a stronger, more nuanced voice when you vote, as we saw with the cookies, or I should say the desserts. You'll see more choices on your ballot, since it's not necessary to narrow the field to the top 2, like we do now here in Washington. We can have a wide field of candidates with diverse viewpoints and still ensure that the person who wins is the one with the broadest possible support. More candidates are encouraged to run because they don't need to worry about splitting the votes with other similar candidates. And as you can see here, in Cambridge, Massachusetts is using it, and they've been using it since 1941. And we also have Pace in Utah, which it started using it in 2019.
And 2 very different communities. One of my favorite benefits, ranked choice voting promotes civil issues focused campaigns. And the candidates in these photos are opponents. They're running against each other, and yet they're talking about the positions they have in common. So why aren't they running negative campaigns, Alex?
So if you'll remember at the beginning, I was talking about how campaigns were getting more vitriolic. And because of these negative campaigns, I was kind of really concerned. Well, let's just look at these examples here. Here we have folks running in ranked choice voting elections, and they seem pretty civil. So let's go through a process of trying to imagine why. Imagine you're one of these candidates out knocking on doors and you're talking to voters. You come to a house with your opponent's yard sign. Normally, you just skip it because they've already made their choice. But if this is a ranked choice voting election, that changes things. You realize, wait, you can still ask for that voter's second choice support. And if you want their second choice vote, it's not a good idea to sling mud at their first choice candidate. So the best strategy is to be civil and to talk about what you stand for. And that's how to win a ranked choice voting election.
And ranked choice voting saves money. So San Juan County can save money by combining the primary and the general election into a single high turnout election, boosting turnout and saving taxpayer dollars. Ranked choice voting elections are efficient, faster, and cheaper. And candidates can save money too by only having to run one campaign. And this helps lower the barrier to entry and encourages more new candidates to run.
And, saving money is really a driving force for many jurisdictions that adopt ranked choice voting. In New York City, which is using ranked choice voting right now, they're looking forward to saving $15 million every time ranked choice voting allows them to skip a runoff election. So I'm a visual person, and I like maps, and this is one of my favorite things here to just see really how widespread ranked choice voting already is. Every state that's colored in yellow uses ranked choice voting in some form. Maine and Alaska use it statewide for federal and presidential elections. Over 20 cities use ranked choice voting, from New York City, that we mentioned, to Payson, Utah, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. So you might ask, how well is it working for these folks who are using it?
Well, Alex, exit polls are positive. Voters who have used ranked choice voting overwhelmingly want to keep it. And polls average 70%, and that's a pretty high level of agreement in this day and age. So 67% of voters rank multiple candidates. So it shows that they understand how to use it and they want to use it. And 90% in exit polls say that ranked choice voting is simple and easy to use. And now for the details on what this could mean for San Juan County, Colin Cole, our policy director, will talk about what's possible and what are the options. And thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you both for that. And we can get going here right along, wanting to be respectful of the commissioner's time with the next portion of the presentation. So thank you for the introduction. My name is Colin Cole. I am the policy director for More Equitable Democracy in my volunteer time, or for Fair Vote Washington in my volunteer time. But in my day job, I'm policy director at More Equitable Democracy. And MED is a racial justice organization that focuses on and specializes in electoral systems. So it's my pleasure here today to talk to you about, if you were interested in pursuing ranked choice voting for San Juan County, what that might actually look like. So you have three options. First of all, you could use ranked choice voting to select the top two under the current primary rules that we have today. You could combine the primary and general elections into a single high turnout election using ranked choice voting, or you could adopt something called proportional representation. And I'll give you a high level idea of each of those three proposals. So to select the top two is probably better than the status quo. When you have those scenarios where you have crowded fields and two candidates can advance to the top two despite not receiving a majority of the vote, you run the risk of actually narrowing your options to candidates that most voters wouldn't have supported. And especially in crowded fields, that gets worse and worse. However, this option probably doesn't provide most of ranked choice voting's benefits. A lot of the research that's been done that shows that ranked choice voting results in, say, more women and people of color both running for and winning office, saving jurisdictions money. Virtually all of those benefits require the combination of the primary and the general election, which is why the vast majority of jurisdictions across the country that use ranked choice voting combine the primary and the general election. You all are allowed to do this as a nonpartisan charter county, which allows Washington state law allows nonpartisan charter counties to combine their primary and general elections. And the best benefit from this is solving that vote splitting problem. You avoid the situation where someone wins office who a majority of voters didn't want, which is clearly a bad democratic outcome. It's also worth noting that primary elections have problems. Kit already mentioned that they have really low voter turnout. In Washington state, we average about 30% turnout in our primary elections. And it's not just low turnout, but it's low turnout that's disproportionately older and wealthier and whiter than the general electorate. So we give outsized voice to a really narrow slice of the electorate that doesn't really represent the general election turnout. It's also expensive. It costs a lot of money to mail everyone 2 sets of ballots when you don't have to. So combining the primary and the general election gets rid of that problem. So that's really good. Your third option, called proportional representation, is actually, it's the bigger option. We're going to kind of talk through it relatively quickly, but we can dive more into it if you have questions. So all of the systems that we're talking about, ranked choice voting to select the top 2, combining the primary and the general, the current system that we use in San Juan County, these are all winner-take-all elections where whoever ends up having the most votes wins the seat. And it doesn't matter if they have a majority or if they have less than a majority, like the winner of the lieutenant governor's race did last November, where he won with just 46% of the vote. If you win all the votes, you take the seat. The concept of proportional representation is that the number of votes should be reflected in the number of seats that community is able to win in elected government. So if 40% of voters identify with candidates of type A, then they should win about 40% of the seats. And if you're 20% of the voters, you shouldn't win nothing, but you should win about 20% of the seats. And as it happens, this is actually the dominant way that most elections are held throughout the world. Almost no countries, aside from former British colonies, use single winner-take-all systems. And proportional representation is actually very, very common. And it has a lot of benefits. It has all the advantages of ranked choice voting that we just talked about, but it also has the potential to solve gerrymandering, because the way gerrymandering works is you're winning with too many votes, or your community has 45% of the vote in 3 different districts, and that's not enough to win. But under a proportional system, you will win a number of seats reflective of your size of the community. There's a lot of research that shows that it can actually help depolarize the electorate in our times of bitter campaign environments where our communities oftentimes don't get along. And it provides equitable representation for all communities who want to choose to vote, not necessarily based off of their geography, but based off of their values. This is actually also used in the United States. It's had variations used in Illinois, New York City, Cincinnati, Cleveland, throughout New England, and a lot more. And it's contemporarily used in Cambridge, Massachusetts, East Point, Michigan, Minneapolis, and Albany. There's a lot of very interesting history there that we can talk about. And for further case studies, we can look to Illinois, that used a proportional system to elect their state legislature for over 100 years, and many, many other countries. It's a little trickier to adopt in Washington state. Washington state RCW currently requires that you run candidates, if they're running at large, by posted position, so position 1, 2, and 3, which which prevents you from adopting a proportional system. But there is actually a path to get it if you're interested anyway, which is through the Washington State Voting Rights Act. The Washington Voting Rights Act provides an exemption to that requirement to use posted positions if you're trying to provide for more equitable outcomes in your elections. And as a very brief case study for you, Yakima County, Washington is currently facing the first ever legal challenge under the Washington State Voting Rights Act. And plaintiffs in that community are requesting proportional ranked choice voting to resolve that complaint. As a quick overview, Latinos make up about 38% of the citizens over the age of 18. So the well over 30 community, they're almost half the total population. But they've only ever elected one non-white commissioner in the county's history. And so the lawsuit alleges that the current system creates an insurmountable barrier for communities of color. Now, the usual solution to a Voting Rights Act challenge is the creation of a so-called majority minority district. The logic being, if you create a district where people of color are the majority of the voters, that they can win a seat there, and that would be representative. And so this is what that might look like in Yakima County. You'll notice District 3, the green district, is about 70% Latino, and they could probably win a seat there. But plaintiffs in Yakima didn't just request districts. They wanted ranked choice voting to be part of their solution, and here's why. First of all, if they were going to go with districts, they needed ranked choice voting to be part of it because of the top two primary. They commissioned, lawyers and mathematicians and demographers who concluded that even if you drew a majority minority district, because of the nature of the top two primary, if Latinos ran 3 or 4 candidates, the majority of the voters in the district could split themselves 4 ways, and you could have just 2 white candidates advance to the general election, thus not making a majority minority district very effective. And so ranked choice voting proposes a promising path for them to make sure that the Yakima County Commission actually reflects the Yakima County population. But that wasn't their remedy preference. Their preference remedy is proportional representation. And we're gonna quickly explain why by looking at this map. The dots on this map show where Hispanic and Native voters live in Yakima. And you'll notice that indeed in the green district, there are a lot of Latino voters. It would be a majority minority district. But if you zoom in a little bit, you'll see just how many people would be left out of that majority minority district. And in fact, it's almost as many people as would live within the district. And so were the plaintiffs to request this districted system, what they would implicitly be telling Latino voters who live in the blue or the yellow district is, you still won't be able to elect a candidate of your choice, but your neighbors in the southeast of the county will be able to, and that would resolve your Voting Rights Act complaint. And so rather than requesting that, what the plaintiffs have requested is proportional ranked choice voting, which would be done countywide, but instead of 3 winner-take-all posted position races, everyone would run in one pool, and the top 3 vote getters would be elected. So the benefits were, first of all, that you can vote for anyone regardless of where you live. If you live in the rural portion of the community or downtown Yakima, you could vote for your candidate of preference. You wouldn't have to be told that the person who's going to represent you actually lives out of your district. It removed the expense of having to draw district lines every 10 years. Those previous maps were also drawn in sort of a best case scenario. And it's challenging to draw districts. And they found that it would allow them to elect a county commission that reflects the community without implicitly incentivizing segregation by saying the place where you get the voting rights remedy is in District 3. And so their map, as requested in their ongoing lawsuit, would look like this. It would just be a county map, and those dots could all share voting preferences if they chose to do so. So you might be wondering, if I already said you can't do proportional representation, why can you do this? And the answer is because the Washington State Voting Rights Act says that laws that would impede your ability to change your voting system to comport with the Washington Voting Rights Act are superseded when adopting that remedy. It's also worth noting that a lawsuit isn't necessary. The drafters of the Washington Voting Rights Act didn't want to necessarily encourage litigious lawsuits. And so they wrote in provisions that said that a jurisdiction can voluntarily change without admitting liability. A jurisdiction could just say that, it's possible that one day the system we're using could eventually be subject to a violation of the Washington State Voting Rights Act. And so we're going to voluntarily use the provisions to change our electoral system. You earlier heard me say that Yakima County is facing the first ever legal challenge under the Washington Voting Rights Act, but it's not the first ever action under the Washington Voting Rights Act, because way back in 2018, the city of Wenatchee actually used that voluntary provision without a lawsuit to change their voting system. Now, there is sort of an open question of if the Charter Review Commission wanted to pursue proportional ranked choice voting, can you do that under those provisions, or would that have to be adopted by the San Juan County Council? You would have to ask legal counsel for the Charter Review Commission to have that answer. But we wanted to put a bug in your ear about this because there's a lot of promising research on the benefits of proportional representation, both from a racial justice perspective, but also from a perspective of depolarizing the electorate and providing fair and equitable democracy to all of our citizens. And that is the 3 options that San Juan County has to choose from. And at this point, I'd love to hand the mic over to the chair of Fair Vote Washington, Lisa Aero, who can help field questions and answers. Lisa?
Colin, thank you. And Kit and Alex, thank you so much as well for that introduction. Colin, if you could just, oh, actually, never mind the slide. We don't need a slide. We did have a couple of known questions that have been submitted already. One is, can we do this with our voting equipment here in San Juan County? I'm delighted that we've got Auditor Mylene Henley here with us, and she's got a question too. We want to start with hers. We also had a question about Pierce County. We want to address that one quickly. And Commissioner Ranker, do let us know if how we're doing for time. I think we have about 5 more minutes for questions. Does that sound about right to you?
That's correct.
Okay, great. Well, we'll keep right on it. Colin, let's start with Auditor Henley's question in the chat. And Auditor Henley, I'm not sure exactly what you were referring to when you said, how does that differ from all at-large positions? But I know that's a question directed at Colin's presentation.
Sure. So I can actually answer that very quickly. It is still actually an all at-large system were you to use county-wide proportional ranked choice voting. What's worth noting is if you, in terms of the jurisprudence about the liability of at-large elections under the Federal Voting Rights Act, is that actually applies to winner-take-all at-large systems. Systems like ranked choice voting or cumulative voting, which has been used in Illinois and a bunch of southern systems, are called modified at-large systems, and those actually have a well-documented history of being used to resolve Voting Rights Act complaints. So the distinction would be that proportional ranked choice voting countywide would be modified at-large.
Great, thank you, Colin. Auditor Henry, would you like to follow up? Does that seem adequate? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd wish. Please.
Sorry,
We've got a list of folks as well. So normally we do not allow members of the public to speak at this point in time, but Auditor Henley, because
I'll talk to Colin later. Thank you.
no, Mylene, because this is such an expertise of yours for our county. Tony, can you mute? Mylene, why don't you go ahead and we'll make an exception this time because this is so important and your expertise. And then I'm going to go to the list.
And this may be going too far down the rabbit hole for this type of presentation, but it sounds like what you're describing is an at-large system, which the WVRA was established to get away from. And that's why they were going to districts with majority-minority populations. So, I'm a big fan of WVRA. I just don't see how that differs from what existed before. So I must have missed something.
Sure, and I'm definitely happy to follow up with the entire commission about this later on. I will clarify that the WVRA's primary distinction is that it helps to dismantle those winner-take-all at-large systems that create insurmountable barriers to communities of color, but that proportional modified at-large system using ranked choice voting actually, based off of the math of how it works, does not create that same barrier. I'd love to follow up by sending the challenge letter filed by the plaintiffs in Yakima County and some of the demographic analysis that shows why this is. But suffice to say, both in Yakima County where it's being requested and actually in East Point, Michigan, proportional ranked choice voting was used to as a federal Voting Rights Act lawsuit remedy accepted by the United States Federal Department of Justice to resolve a complaint against an at-large system. So it's a bit a lot. The distinction is a bit hard to get into when we're going quickly here, but I think you would get it very quickly if we were to follow up on that subject specifically.
Yeah, let's talk later. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great.
And
So why don't we go to your general question there, and then we have Tony.
Great. Fantastic. And Colin, if you could go ahead and stop the screen sharing now, I think we might all enjoy a chance to see each other just a bit more, because I also want to acknowledge John Devon on the call here, who's going to help us with Q&A here for a minute, although we may have a little bit less time than we had hoped. But John, I know you wanted to just say briefly, you have a particular vantage on ranked choice voting from your role on the board of Represent Us. Did you want to say a couple things before we dive into any more questions?
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. Thank you, CRC, for providing the forum. I'm a part-time Orcas resident and a board co-chair of the nonpartisan National Democracy Reform Group called Represent Us. And in my discussions with my full-time Orcas friends, we've talked about ranked choice voting because it's a key pillar of what Represent Us stands for in the country. So I want to thank my friends for speaking up. I think that's a lot of the reason why we got to have this opportunity today. So thank you. My colleagues from Fair Vote have done a great job of outlining RCV and why it would have a positive impact on San Juan County elections. My lens of expertise is at the national level, and I'm here to answer any questions that people might have at that level. If I could point one thing out, like San Juan County did for 100% vote by mail elections, they can be a beacon to the state and to the nation, where the issues addressed by ranked choice voting are more severe than in San Juan County. So it's a great opportunity to lead and help solve the difficult problems we have with the political system in the United States today. And then be glad to answer any questions you have.
John, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take first crack at a question we got about Pierce County. And I want to acknowledge that here in Washington State, we did have one example of ranked choice voting being used ever so briefly in 2008 and 2009 in Pierce County, Washington. And this is a situation that makes me think often of the first time my daughter rode a bike. She was very small. The bike did not fit. It did not go well. She didn't understand how the brakes works, and she was pointed downhill, and you can imagine the rest. So it took several years before she was willing to consider getting on that bike again. Pierce County used ranked choice voting in the very, very early days, and it was difficult. And there's no denying that for the election administrators who were in charge of that election, it was a heavy lift. It was expensive. They spent more than $1.5 million on the one election. Voters at the end of the day had not felt that they had understood it well, and there were a variety of reasons for which the voters decided to move away from ranked choice voting after only one election cycle. One of them, just to be clear, was because top two became an option. So Pierce County decided to join the rest of the state in implementing the top two system, which had just been cleared for use by the U.S. Supreme Court after several years of lawsuit. I'm happy to address more questions about sort of what happened with Pierce County, but as you can see, it's very much like my daughter. She looked around, she realized after a few years, people are enjoying riding bikes. I might have had an experience that was a bit of an aberration, and that indeed is the situation. Again, not to suggest that people in Pierce County didn't do everything they possibly could to make that election go well, but it was very early days. They didn't have the tools that exist now. They didn't have the best practices. So that's.
Lisa, I'm gonna jump in here because we're at time, and I've got some questions from some commissioners, and actually our next presentation is from someone.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
From Pierce County.
Yes.
And so I want to let her have time to speak as well.
Please.
So I've got Tony and then Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, the group that just presented. Appreciate that. Mr. Chair, just a matter of procedural moving forward. I see that Sharon Hannick is on the call right now, and she's going to speak probably about something different. When is the time for us to ask questions that pertain to our county, and also that is the group going to stay for answering questions later on, or what's going to happen next after Sharon Hannick presents?
I was hoping that we'd have a tiny bit of Q&A now, and then Sharon would present, and we'd have a tiny bit more Q&A.
All right.
So if
I'd
you have
like
a
to-
question based on the presentation we just had, I would ask the question now.
All right, great, thank you. A great presentation, but I have to say that the map that you were showing earlier about how many different counties and states are using ranked choice voting. I was the chair of the subcommittee that talked about this, and we felt that we covered a lot of different points. But it looked to me like a lot of the jurisdictions that are doing ranked choice voting are either municipalities such as cities and so on. Not many are counties, and there are one or two that are states. So the question that I have is, in San Juan County, where we hardly ever get more than 2 candidates for a particular position, how will that apply in San Juan County? And number 2, why would we want to do that if we already have a primary system that takes care of if there are more than 2 candidates? The second part of that question is, what positions in San Juan County that are elected positions will this ranked choice voting be applied to? If you think this is a good idea for this county, would it involve school directors, for example, fire commissioners, or is it only the elected officials that are, you know, whatever elected officials there are in the county, such as judges and auditors and treasurers and so on? Will it include everybody, or just a handful of elected officials? So please take your time.
Tony, thank you for the question. Our recommendation would be that this would be used for county offices. And I'd like to direct the rest of the answer to Colin Cole, if you'd like to take a first crack at that.
Absolutely. So yes, county offices like county council and auditor and so on. Of course, it would be up to you as a charter review commission. If you decided that you only wanted to use it for county auditor, that could be a charter amendment that you could propose. With regard to why would we want it anyway, if we have top 2, to that I would say sort of 2 things. The first one is that as the examples that we gave with regard to the lieutenant governor's race or the state treasurer's race show, even with top 2, it is possible for the only 2 candidates in November to be opposed by the majority. Now, granted, as you said, you rarely have more than 2 candidates even file for office, which actually I think makes a strong case for ranked choice voting. In the cases where you only have 2 candidates run for office, under current law, you hold a primary election for 2 candidates so that 2 candidates, those same 2, can be on the ballot in November. And it costs your county.
No, you don't. You don't have a primary for 2 candidates.
Got it. Okay.
Not in this county.
All right. Thank you for the clarification there. So I guess it would really only apply when you have 3 or more candidates, but it would allow you to see those same cost savings even when you have 3 candidates. And to answer one other question that you asked about where ranked choice voting is used, I've got this slightly more detailed map for you that shows at what level ranked choice voting is being used in different jurisdictions. So there are a number of counties, including Benton County right nearby us. 5 states are using it to some level statewide. And there are indeed a large number of municipalities and then a few counties. And then we can follow up with this map for you as well, if it would be helpful to have that for further consideration.
Colin, we need to update your map because Georgia just added. They're using ranked choice voting now for their military and overseas voters now. Yep.
Jane, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's a little bit along the lines of what Tony just asked as well. And it's also a bit about what will be probably a need to have a more San Juan County specific discussion about, the pros and cons of this. And so I think I'd like to thank Fairvote colleagues for this very elaborate presentation. And it was really, really very informative and very appreciative of it. I think in the deliberations of the subcommittee on elections that I also sat on, that Tony chaired, we were left feeling that, and this was based on quite a detailed discussion with Mylene Henley and also her colleague who works in our elections office, that given the size given the number of positions, elected positions that exist in our county, and as Tony alluded to, the number of people who run for those positions, it just may be that at that level for this county, it isn't a system that's necessarily that warranted at this stage. Additionally, it's not something that has yet passed at the state level, although there's seems to be the possibility that ranked choice voting may pass at the state level in the future. And the feeling that perhaps much more would be known and much more information would be available to counties if they chose to adopt this. So I think our commission would benefit from a further, more specific discussion to how it would benefit our county at the level of elections of county officials. But thank you. I just want to say big thanks again for your presentation.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Sharon, please.
Yeah, I see there's a comment in the chat from Kelly Unger, and I'm wondering if anyone would like to address the Heritage Foundation article against RCV.
I'll take that one. The Heritage Foundation article really comes out of opposition to ranked choice voting in Maine, and the history there is very interesting. In 2010, there was a very contentious election between a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent. And because of the vote splitting between the three, the person who won was barely over 1/3 of support. And so the people, and then that person went on to govern in a very partisan and unpopular way. And that created the impetus for people to choose ranked choice voting. But then the winning governor, his point of view about how terrible ranked choice voting would be because he saw that he wouldn't win, worked with the Heritage Foundation to develop a lot of those materials. So, and if you look at the materials, you see that they are very hypothetical. All election systems have corner cases where they break down. Let's say like the winner has barely over 1/3 support in a three-way race. And they point out some of those corner cases, which are true, but they're not really going to happen. And then when you look at the other thing I'll say is that neither political party likes ranked choice voting because it creates the opportunity for independence. And so when the political parties get their think tanks behind trying to make one position or another, that very much is motivated reasoning in their minds.
If I might just add one capstone to that response, it would just be that when we look at that large list of jurisdictions that are using it throughout the country, almost 36 cities now and 8 states, none of them report the problems that the Heritage Foundation report suggests could happen. In all of those jurisdictions, ranked choice voting remains popular and providing the benefits that we've discussed in our presentation.
Great. So Tony's going to get the last question, then we've got to move on to Sharon. And Bob, I see you and some others have hands up. If you could wait and let Sharon present, and then you can ask your questions. Thank you so much. Tony, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, is Mylene still around? Yep, I see Mylene. How about Randy? Is Randy still around? I don't see Randy. Here's my question to Lisa and the group. So our software in the county is built to do certain things, and I'm wondering, have you had any experience in having to deal with the software issues that certain small counties probably can't afford to upgrade? And how are those software products? I mean, how do you audit a program or an election that has this ranked choice voting that is kind of going to be unique to our county if it in fact gets approved by the voters? is that something that is it easily done, or I don't know, maybe Mylene can tell us a little more about our software system that we have, and then maybe Randy can explain things about.
Actually, I'm going to ask that if Mylene and Randy, we can have back on at another time, because if we don't move on, we're not going to get to the other items on the agenda.
All right, thank you.
I can offer a 2-sentence answer if that's
Lisa or
helpful.
somebody from our
Colin,
presentation.
Colin,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I'll just say that San Juan County uses the DS-850 Express Vote system, which is compatible with ranked choice voting.
I'll take your word for it. I don't know what the X850 system is.
It requires a software update, but and we can send you some materials on this as well.
Right.
But it is compatible with national and in many cases free software that makes implementation simple.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, but what system did you say we use, Colin?
The DS-850 Express Vote.
No, that's not what we use.
It's Hart InterCivic, I believe they got, right?
Hart has two.
Oh,
different
is that
systems.
Verity Touch?
We're in Verity. Yeah.
Sorry, I was misaligned on the appendix I was looking at. What I just said still applies to Verity Touch as well. I apologize.
I don't want to go into depth because Kevin asked not to, but as our current system could not handle ranked choice voting. We
So
can talk about
Colin,
that.
pause. I'm going to ask you guys, I need to move us on. So if you want to hang out after Sharon's done, but we need to give Sharon adequate time to present. And then I have another full 4 agenda items. So I'm going to move us on. So I want to thank you very much for your presentation. This was really informative and really helpful too. And I know there's more questions, and I'm sorry we don't have more time at this point. If we have to, we'll reschedule it. But I also want to have time to gauge the commissioner's interest in spending more time on this as well. So with that, I want to thank you, and you're welcome to hang out and listen to the next presentation and the Q&A. But I really want to thank Sharon for being with us today, who was a chair of their Charter Review Commission last time around after the ranked choice voting dilemma, but she was a vote observer and engaged in the process back when Pierce County was looking at this. And so Sharon, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I did get on late, so I did not hear the full presentation before me. Thank you, Fair Vote, for presenting your side. And I just want to talk a little bit about the other side, meaning the side of the voter when they're approaching this, and my experience of working with the Pierce County Elections Office as an observer on the inside, watching the ranked choice voting process go through. Mindful, it did happen in 2008 and in 2009 for 2 years. We had ranked choice voting. I was one of those folks that would try to explain what kind of animal this was to other voters. So I actually would be asked to speak at different group meetings to explain why they have 2 ballots. So just kind of in a nutshell, what happened in 2008 after ranked choice voting was voted in through their charter review process of 2006, that we had a situation where we had to run essentially 2 elections at one time. So if you have ranked choice voting, let's say in the year 2022, when you have all the House of Representatives and some senators running and statewide races, that you essentially will have 2 systems of running ballots. And that's what we were faced with. We had a ranked choice ballot where we chose 1, 2, and 3 as rankings. And we had the regular, what we called the traditional ballot. What we found is with the confusion, people would turn in the traditional ballot, but not everyone even turned in their ranked choice ballot because they really didn't know what to do with it. So in a sense, that was voter confusion and voter drop off. Not everyone voted. When they voted, they might mark their ballot the first choice, but they didn't always mark the second choice and the third choice. And so again, there was voter drop off in that time because of confusion. And even the second year, we still had pretty much a lot of confusion on that. There was expense again. If you had 2 ballots with postage, we now had to pay for 2 sheets of paper. And the auditor's office did take it upon themselves to pay for the cost. So Pierce County Auditor's Office, Elections Office also paid for sending out the ballots and the postage coming in. The voter themselves then, when they got the ballots, they had this choice of 1, 2, and 3. Sometimes there are only 3 candidates running for the nonpartisan race of a local county race. Other times there were 5 candidates running. And I did find out later on that when you have ranked choice voting, there is a bit of an inconsistency because the equipment that you have may be able to process 3 places or 4 places or 5 places. But if you have 7 people running, then you might have to add more. It took an hour and a half of processing times of the computer just to run one run of ranked choice voting. And so it was time consuming. The auditor's office did run 24 hours. And so they had to have extra staff or overtime for the staff. As observers, we had to staff 24 hours because we were there in the middle of the night watching it. And so just a lot of extra manpower to run. Plus you had to process the 2 ballots. When you open up your envelope and you visual scan of the ballot itself and all those detailed processing, now you're doubling it because we had 2 ballots. I do understand that current days with the technology we have, you may not need 2 ballots. You might be able to print it all on 1 ballot, but then you'd still have to figure out what kind of election it is, how many initiatives you have, all the other processes of creating the ballot. So you may end up with 2 ballots after all, just because you have too many folks running and things. The other thing that I didn't like about ranked choice voting was when you have that person that doesn't win and you're dropping off. So you vote, you take the top winners and you're dropping off somebody, essentially the one with the least number of votes, and you're redistributing their votes to the other candidates. So in a way, I didn't feel that it was fair that there was somebody that I really didn't like, that candidate. I would never want to have my vote go towards them. But in a ranked choice voting situation, if your candidate is the lowest vote getter and it's dropped off, your vote will be redistributed to the other candidates. And you may end up helping a candidate that you really didn't want to win to get more votes on the future runs. So that's part of the process. I don't know if that's going to be the same formula used, but that's the one the Secretary of State had recommended in their most current version of offering ranked choice voting. The voter education process was huge. And even in this bill that is on the table right now, it didn't make it through cutoff, but you do have $2 million set aside by the Secretary of State's office just for the Secretary of State from the state standpoint to educate people on how to vote. And in a way, I'm thinking if it takes $2 million to teach someone how to vote, when the old traditional way is you mark the guy you liked, and then that person, you add up their votes and the person with the most number wins. And I guess some folks feel that's not fair, but yet I think that's probably the best system. As a woman, a Japanese, Asian American that has run for state treasurer, I have run for legislative position. I haven't always won, but I don't think that ranked choice voting would have put me in a better position of running. And in general, I would say that it should be the person that is qualified, the person with the most vote getters, should be the one that earns that space to be the winner. In Pierce County, the most unlikely candidate, after you went through the algorithms, and in this case, instead of dropping 1 person, this particular race, they dropped 2 people. And I don't know if that's truly fair when one race you drop 1 person, another race you drop 2 people, but that was the as much as the machine could handle. And the most unlikely person won the election. And that was the person that even had a recall on his race afterwards. So it doesn't mean that the person that is the most qualified might always win the race, as evident in some people call that a fluke, that perhaps that was an anomaly. But you have to make sure that if you're going to do ranked choice voting, that you have a consistent way. You're always going to drop one person or you're always going to drop two. It should really be a formula that everyone can understand. At the end of the day, if you were to audit this and say who's the winner, then ranked choice voting makes it extremely difficult. And from the people I've talked to, it is, I don't want to say it's impossible, because I think there are ways to do it, but it is extremely time consuming, manpower. And not only do you have to find out who the top vote getters are and who the lowest vote getters are, you have to figure out how you're going to redistribute. The redistribution is completely dependent upon the computer algorithms. And in the case of San Juan Island, where you have Heart Civic as your hardware, and I think Veritas as your software, yes, the term I think I heard was compatible. Yes, it is compatible. Yes, you can do ranked choice voting, but what you're really doing is collating the numbers, figuring out what the totals are, and then you have to export those numbers into another computer program to actually run the algorithms. There's not a single county in Washington state that has purchased these other programs to run the algorithms. Dominion software was the one that Pierce County used, and they are one of the softwares that you can run ranked choice voting on. I would say at this point, after this election, when you have folks saying that there was cheating and not cheating, the confidence level in voting systems, the confidence level in the computer algorithms and the computer programs is extremely low across the nation. And so when you start introducing a new element of depending completely on the computer to run your algorithms, voter trust, I fear, is going to go down. And that is what the Secretary of State has testified each time this issue has come up. We have to gain voter trust. We have to be able to prove to our voters, yes, here's the numbers, here's the winner. We can trust our machines. Once you get to that point, then you can introduce other elements. But right now, at this stage of the game, I don't think that we're there. And we have too many people just concerned about that dependency on the computer. One of the big elements that I'm concerned about also is that ranked choice voting in many of these other states that have been pointed out to you, that in the past, I have looked at those states and they have a voter law that says every ballot must be in the door by election day. I don't think ranked choice voting, and Fair Vote can correct me, but has it been used in a state where you have 21 days to get your ballot in? Not counting the military folks, they kind of get special exceptions. But just in general, in Washington state, you could put your ballot in the mail on election day, have it postmarked correctly, and 1 week later, it actually gets in the door. One ballot can change the entire algorithms of who is the winner on a ranked choice voting system. So we have a situation where we have people curing ballots. You didn't sign this ballot, I'm going to knock on your door and make sure that you get your ballot in. So even up to the day before certification, the elections office are getting new ballots coming in the door. The algorithms for ranked choice voting should only be done when the whole universe of all the ballots coming in is going to be in the door and at the table. Because that one extra ballot coming in 1 week later can change the entire outcome of a race. And so we have to change the mindset of the voter to know we will never reveal the results. And every time that you do run those algorithms before certification day, you could have a different winner each time you run the algorithms. How is that going to be for voter confidence? Oh, gee, Joe was the winner this time, and oh, gee, Susie's the winner next time. And so voter confidence is going to severely fail when you run ranked choice voting before certification day, before all the ballots are in the door. And we may even have to change some of our regulations and policies to say, we will not accept any new ballots because we need to allow 4 hours to run the thing. So you can't run it the morning of certification. You've got to save time the day before. And so, there's also going to be other policy changes that must occur. And so things, the concept of ranked choice may work in other states, but not in the state when you have 21 days where ballots are constantly coming in the door, or 14 days, depending on the election cycle that you're in. So those are some things. I would say voter confidence is going to be a real problem and a real issue. I would that it's often sold to you as being equitable and fair, although I feel I don't think that it's not fair that the person with the most votes win. I think that's still an okay thing. I'm for that kind of system. I don't think that minorities really have a guarantee or that it really is going to help a minority to win. Just because you have ranked choice voting, I don't see that as a selling point. And I do worry that when your ballots get redistributed to others, that in itself is not true fairness. I'm checking to see what kind of questions we have.
I have a few hands
and,
up, Sharon, if you're ready for questions.
Yeah, and then I would just say that the person with the most votes did not win. I mean, if you actually went through and calculated who got the most votes in Pierce County, that person was not declared the winner under ranked choice voting. So, yes, and I will take questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sharon, so much for your presentation. So I have a question from our Sharon.
Yeah, I would really appreciate it if somebody from Fair Vote could speak to the person who got elected in that RCV election in Pierce County.
Well, that's
Why did
I'd rather not get into a back and forth.
Situation?
And that was I'll just say that's the way the numbers worked out. In that case, I think there were 5 people, 5 people that were running for office versus 3 or 4. And so the way the algorithms worked out as they went through 3 cycles of permutations, they did drop off 2 people rather than dropping off 1 person. So I don't know if that makes a difference on how everything worked out, but
so you're saying if it had been a top 2 or any other kind of election, that same person probably would have also won, or not?
No, he would not. He would not have.
With all due respect,
So Lisa,
Commissioner, may I?
Lisa, no. What I want to do is if there's questions for Sharon, and then if we have time, then because I actually have some other questions for you as well, but I want to make sure that any questions for Sharon we get through first.
Sure.
So are there any other questions for Sharon at this point in time? I see Jane's hand.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sharon, I'm sorry, I kind of would have, I think I missed your introduction a little bit. It'd be very helpful if you could reintroduce yourself and your background in this, because I'm really not clear on, the position from which you're speaking with the experience that you've had.
I was one of the observers in Pierce County on ranked choice voting. I was kind of, in there behind the scenes, but since then I have worked with the election supervisor at that time and learned a lot more about ranked choice voting. I've kind of just made that something that I would wanted to know. And I was chair of the Charter Review Commission in the year 2016 that actually came up as a topic. We had 21 members. I would say it was evenly split across the board on where we were politically. And the one consensus we all had was we didn't like ranked choice voting. And one of our members was the ex-auditor of Pierce County that ran elections. And we all said, we don't want this to happen again. So I would say it was, whether you are considered a Democrat or Republican, we all hated ranked choice voting the same. And so that discussion did come up both in my Charter Review Commission, and then I was in watching it happening, on the ground while it was happening.
Right. So just a quick follow-up question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, and that is, because your opinion certainly stands in very much stark contrast to the presentation of Fair Vote and other things I've read about RCV. So I'm curious to know, given that it was an experience that your county had some 13 years ago now, and certainly a lot of things have evolved in the systems and the processes since then. Are your views au courant, so to speak, in terms of how this system
So
has proven to be
it's
effective?
a great question. And I would say for the most part, the biggest changes would be technology. As I said, it took an hour and a half to run the processes. Perhaps now it's going to run faster. You know, our equipment and our machines are better. However, the concept of trying to rely on computers for the algorithms, that still remains true today as it was then. And I would say that the paper handling of the machine, you know, a lot of processing in an elections office is just the physical ballot itself and the things that you have to do to prepare that ballot to even go into the machines. And that's where I said we had to process 2 sets of ballots. That might still be the case today. That portion of it, paper doesn't change. And so the only thing I would say would be more updated, and it would be the technology component, the processing element. Right now we scan ballots rather than tabulate ballots, but still every ballot is run through a particular machine. I have also talked with some other auditors around the state, and they're concerned, and possibly even, same with Auditor Henley, is they don't have the equipment right now. So there is still that unknown. What is it going to cost me? What kind of training, extra training I'm going to need to bring in this technology? How do we do the logic and accuracy checks of the technology now? Because you're running on one machine, getting totals on one particular type of machine, and somehow you have to translate that, take it to another system, in my mind, it's layman's, you take that stick and then you load that program onto another computer. So again, that is the part where, again, the chain of custody, because it's not happening all on one machine. And it is going to have to be transferred in some way, translated, another software update. I shouldn't say not one machine. It is not one program that does everything. You are going to have to collate numbers and then input those numbers in some fashion into the ranked choice voting software.
Thank
you,
you.
Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
Okay,
And Mr. Chair, there is a comment in the chat that just clarifies that it's no longer necessary to use 2 separate ballots. So I just thought.
Yeah,
so I'm going to
Mhm.
ask, not now, but I'm going to ask Marlene to follow up with us on some of those as well for our county specific. But Tony, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sharon, for making it, I guess not making it up here. You're on Zoom, so you could be anywhere.
Yeah.
My question, I have an engineering background, and I understand algorithms and the complexity of things running like that. So if the election is closed in some jurisdictions, for example, in San Juan County, if the election is closed, there has to be a recount and so on. How have you had any experience, or do you know what happens if there's a vote result and there's a recount? What happens to the algorithm? My imagination would be that it probably goes haywire. Is that can you tell us?
Well, from I would say my best source for that is to talk to the people that actually do ranked choice voting, who handled it that year, and also the election folks. And so I've talked with some of them, and some of them they feel it's almost impossible, but I don't believe that's the right word to use. I have heard that it's extremely difficult. It's time consuming. It's more manpower. And even the literature on auditing it's not easy. It's not like you take your staff and you count up, one pile, here's Culp, here's Inslee, Culp and Inslee, and make 2 piles and then add it up. You cannot do it that way. So it's not a simple process. And we have that law of 1/2 of 1%. I don't know if what's going to happen in a ranked choice voting situation. And I don't know if Fair Vote even has some answers that later on they can share with you. But from what I've seen, it's most of the folks I've talked to in elections offices have kind of said, I hope that never happens.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I need to move us on entirely now. And I think there's a lot of other questions that have come up. What I would like to do is I'm not going to ask for any action or thoughts on this or further discussion at this point so that we can move on. What I'm going to do is ask commissioners to put their thoughts in writing. Any other questions you have, you can send them to Sharon, you can send them to Fairvote, we can connect you personally. We can ask Mylene to get back to us with some of the other questions that came up. But we really need to move on at this point in time. And it may be, and Liz, I see your hand, I'll get to you in one sec. It may be that if there's additional conversation that needs to take place with the full commission, that we'll schedule additional time for this subject. But at this point, I really need to move us on. And so Liz, go ahead.
Thank you.
I wanted to see if we could create a quick mechanism for ranked choice voting to reply directly to us on the things they heard today. And I would appreciate that. So if they can send it to you, you forward it to us.
You mean Fairvote, Washington, or Sharon?
Yes.
Yeah.
Lisa and her team to respond specifically to what we've heard, and they've also heard. You know, I would value hearing their reaction to that, since time is not allowing us to hear from them.
And I do have a kind of silent partner that is the election supervisor. So I can get you also, information from her.
And so I think Liz makes an excellent point. So if the folks from Fairvote or Sharon or any of your colleagues, if you have any other information or any questions that have come up that you'd like to respond to, you both have my email if you want to send them to me, and I will share them with the full commission. And then Mylene, I was going to ask, you had raised some points in chat as well. If you could clarify this for us, just in a short email to us as well, I think that would be really helpful. And then what I want to do is gauge at a future meeting the commission's interest in continuing this conversation, or moving in this direction or not moving in this direction. But I'd like to give us time to think about it. And I'd also like to give Sharon and her colleagues and Lisa and her colleagues time to answer any questions that have come up, so that we can make a more educated decision when that issue comes up. But I also want to thank Lisa and Sharon and Colin and John and the others who presented to us today for taking the time and providing us just a wealth of information. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And spend more time. Okay, if folks don't mind on the commission, I'd like to move the agenda around a little bit. I was going to present the budget next. I'd like to move instead directly into elected versus appointed to make sure that committee gets enough time to report out on their process so far, so that we can consider that. And then I will give a brief budget update at the end, and still hopefully finishing on time in 37 minutes. So with that, why don't we go to the election versus appointed committee, if everybody's okay with that? Wonderful. Thank you all. Maureen, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. I sent around a summary to everyone today, just so that you can maybe follow us as we go along. And I'm going to ask Tony, would you be willing to put that on share? Tony?
Tony, you're muted.
You're muted, huh?
I think Tony's saying yes, he'd be happy to share his screen.
Okay, we talked about it, and so he had offered. That's great. So the elected versus appointed task list is pretty direct. We have 7 items. We are not done, but we have gone through quite a lot. And if you can follow this, this is not in any order of priority, and that will be done later, but you'll have a quick idea of what we've been talking about and how far we've come. So the first item we had tackled was, should the county manager be elected or appointed? And there was a little bit more regarding a review of his scope of work, authority, and function, which we did decline to talk about because I believe that was being handled by another committee. So we did vote on this to make a recommendation that he remain an appointed position with the decline to pursue discussion on the scope of work. And underneath it, I've listed pretty much all the findings that we discussed during our discussion of it. I also have a list of arguments against the appointment, but I think these are the most important for you to see tonight. And it just covers the basic things. If you have any questions on that, maybe we could wait that. If you want to stop here, if there are any questions on this item, please feel free to ask, and then we can go on to the next if you don't. So is anybody asking?
Any questions for Maureen at this point in time? Could you scroll up again?
Here you go. Can you read that, Kevin?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Okay.
And so everybody's got that. So the motion is basically to say the county manager stays the same.
Correct. Correct. And you might need time to think about this. So I thought maybe we'll just go through this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we can you can start asking questions at the end. Maybe that's better.
Yeah, that's probably better. And actually, Maureen, if you don't mind, let me chime in quickly on just the process.
Sure.
Some questions have come up on this. And the ranked choice voting was actually a good example of this. So just to be clear, subcommittees are spending a lot of time diving into different issues. And for the most part, their recommendations are going to come forward. And I imagine that the full commission will then discuss those. And in most cases, I imagine probably side with the subcommittee. There will be issues where there will be need for additional discussion. I would hope there will be need for additional discussion so that the full commission can educate themselves on the issues and more importantly, or as importantly, how and why the subcommittee came to a decision. It is important to point out, however, that the full commission adopts the recommendations that will go to the county council and then ultimately to the voters. And so if there are a number of commissioners who want to revisit an issue or even reconsider an issue from a subcommittee, that is a possibility. I'm not suggesting that should or will happen, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the subcommittees are making a recommendation to the full commission, and then the full commission will adopt the full recommendations and scope that will go out to the voters. And so what we're trying to do now is get these presentations from the subcommittees so those of us not on those subcommittees can think about what the subcommittee is considered, what their recommendations to us are, and if we support that recommendation.
Good, thank you. And we know as a committee that these are just our proposals and they have to go to the full commission. This one just didn't have a whole lot of disagreement. People felt pretty strongly that it was pretty critical for the county manager to be appointed, that having an elected person and an elected council just was a conflict. So here we are with that. It's all ayes, motion passed. So Tony, can you scroll a little bit higher, move it a little? Thank you. The next one we took on was should the county health officer be an elected position or not? And that we talked about it. We spent some time on this, but pretty much everybody was in agreement that the county health officer should remain an appointed position. And we did not discuss the distribution of power going back to the council during a state of emergency. Somehow that didn't fall into the scope of our election work. And so we wanted to just leave that. But we did agree as a group, a full subcommittee, that it should remain appointed. There is also something about that office that is dealt with out of Bellingham. And I think the jurisdiction is broader than just the county. And the next one we talked about, should there be term limits? We talked about this for quite a while. Ultimately, we had a bunch of different motions, but we came up with a recommendation that the county council be limited to 3 consecutive terms, provided that being out of office for 1 full term, that person can run again. This wasn't unanimous, but it was a lively discussion. And please, all of our subcommittee folks, my gentlemen folks, please feel free to jump in here at any point, and I'm going to ask you to respond because you had a lot to do with how we came up with this. So I do want you to participate here. Okay, let's go to 3. Excuse me, let's go to 4.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair? I'm not sure if you can see everybody. It's Kyle.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, and if somebody, I can only see a few of you. So if you have a
Sure.
question, just raise your voice and I'm calling you. If that's
Sorry
okay.
for the
with you.
upset. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, I'm back on 2. I'm just curious, did you hear from anyone by way of sort of input externally on that topic, or was that all discussion internally? Did you find any guest speakers?
Regarding the county health officer?
Yes, ma'am.
We did not hear from anyone.
Okay.
So
Thank
it
you.
was an internal review. Is that okay? Did you get that?
I did. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now we get into some of the meatier things. And the next one is number 4. Should the auditor and treasurer's departments be consolidated and a CFO hired to oversee the combined departments? We discussed this at least 5 or 6 times through a variety of different meetings. We ran a bunch of ideas. We heard from the auditor, we heard from the treasurer, we heard from the assessor, because those are the 3 financial departments. And as you can see, we had a lot of scenarios here that we kind of looked through. The first was leave the auditor, treasurer, assessor separate offices. That was a majority of votes in favor of that. The next one was have them appointed rather than elected. We had no second, so that didn't pass. The third was that we have the assessor change from elected to an appointed. Again, no second was offered. And then last, we had a motion to have the auditor, treasurer, and assessor remain elected offices. That motion was passed at 4 ayes with 2 abstentions. So this wasn't unanimous. And is there anything else, Tony or Dick, you want to say anything here?
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Please, go ahead.
We had, as you can tell from these 4 items that are in red, we had a healthy and very big discussion about different things. The final motion was one that we felt that is a kind of a compromise because none of the different combinations actually worked for us as far as a subcommittee is concerned. The vote was basically 4-0. The abstentions are not necessarily a vote, if you will, because they did not vote. So I would say this is more of a unanimous decision by the people voting. But I do love my colleagues on the committee. We all are in good, we have very good decorum and very respectful. So the discussion was very informative, and it was very hard to get to this point.
Yes, Kyle, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you remind the whole commission on number 4 what the motivator or motivators are for this? Was this a financial question in origin? I mean, I appreciate the elected versus appointed covers lots of other things, but what were the drivers among the membership to ask these specific questions?
Well, from the freeholders to the first charter review to us, this group, there is always a discussion about, do we have too many elected officials? Should those offices be reviewed? Should we have just appointed? Should there be combinations of these departments? It was certainly brought up in the last charter review, and it was easy enough to bring it forward again at this because we didn't have time at the last commission to really delve in. And it's complicated. And each person that presented to us, as they did to the full council in some cases, had compelling reasons for keeping their departments whole and as is. And there are pros and cons for each one of them. They offered them. Tony, go ahead.
May I add, Madam Chair?
Please.
Kyle, thank you for the
also
question.
have Jane also has her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for the question, Kyle. If you look at the first red item, in that motion, we decided that they should remain separate because we looked at different combinations and didn't see any major benefit of combining offices because we felt that some of the FTEs of the management portion of those positions would still be there, but the actual working portion of those positions would have to be replaced by other FTEs. So
Yes.
based on that, we decided that to keep them separate. But then the fourth one was that if they're separate, what do we do now? Well, we decided that we keep them elected as opposed to appointed, and mostly because of the cost of appointing. I'm sorry, yes, mostly because of the cost of the appointing, and also we felt that some of those positions needed to have the autonomy of not being managed by the county manager or by the county council. They needed to be autonomous because they're dealing with public funds. They're dealing with a lot of different things that the public is really the group that's being served. So
correct. Checks and balances was an issue for all of the groups that spoke to us. So that seemed very important.
Thank you for the clarification.
Madam Chair, you had a hand from Jane and then also Bob.
Hi, Jane.
Hey, Maureen, thanks very much. Yeah, just a couple of questions and maybe a comment in response to what Tony just said about, the fourth item under number 4, the vote that was there. I mean, I don't think 2 abstentions means it was a majority vote in favor myself, and I'm kind of interested in understanding what the abstention positions were representative of. I think that's kind of interesting from my perspective. Yeah, I'd like to understand a little bit more about, what some of those who were in favor of perhaps seeing some of these elected positions as being appointed felt about that. Why they were of that view. I'm just interested to understand that a bit more.
Absolutely, and I'll have someone speak to that. I know Bob wants to say something. These were very difficult decisions, and everyone had some ambivalence around some of it. It was hard. The other idea was we were looking to see, could there be cost savings in combining? I wanted to mention that as well. Is there a way to save the county money by combining or eliminating or doing that? And ultimately, that did not. Each person said that probably would not have been the case because you would need to have another person take over their work. So Bob, go ahead. I know you wanted to say something.
And then after Bob, you've got Dick.
Yes,
I'll just say that I was initially motivated in wanting to see some sort of a combination of offices. I was initially motivated, I will have to say, honestly, as by an attempt to save some money, because I foresaw the creation of a Department of Climate and Environment with a Climate and Environment Commissioner, and I foresaw problems with that getting across to the public unless we described to the public a method to pay for that, and that was not a very popular position on from the rest of my fellow commissioners. I will also say that they were also astute and offered such convincing arguments that I did end up changing my mind a couple of times. Now, as far as the other question about elected versus appointed, whether they should be one or the other, I started off being very much in favor of everyone switching to appointed because I saw, the benefits of the person being appointed, not kind of setting up a little kingdom over here where every 4 years they had to find a way to convince the voters, but beyond that, they could do what they wanted to. And other people, I think, viewed that as a positive. So, it depends on where you were coming from on that. That's all I've got to say about number 4.
Go ahead, Richard.
I will explain. I was the no vote on that first measure. And a big part of the reason was I simply didn't buy the majority assumption that it wouldn't save any significant amount of money. I thought that was pure speculation, and there was nothing to support that. And I couldn't agree. I thought that, I mean, I thought for a long time, going back to my experience in county government, that the treasurer was a position that could be consolidated. And I also thought, given the push for the climate position, it was also a way to save money. And then on the last of those measures, I was one of the abstentions just because I thought, given my vote on the first one, you know, do I want to vote no or just abstain on this one? I abstained. I could have just as easily voted no.
Thank you. That was pretty good. Are there any other questions? Yeah, this was
Maureen?
not, yes.
I have one actually. What was the subcommittee's conversations with regard to the actual cost savings and efficiencies? I've spent a lot of time looking at consolidations of agencies, and I don't see how, if, for instance, you took pieces of the treasurer and put it into the assessor and some into the auditor, how you're not going to save some monies. And I'm not just talking through attrition or loss of jobs. I'm talking about just some of those back office functions. When we did this at the state, and actually we did it not with elected offices, but with other departments when I was a county commissioner and a county council person, we did some of this. And every time we actually did see savings. So what was the conversation? And did you get into the specific details of looking at each of the individual functions and job duties and so on, and back office functions of each department?
Well, I think we had one of our members spoke to Mylene and talked about how that could work and how that could happen. The treasurer let us know and she attended many of our meetings and let us know that if we consolidated the treasurer's role, that she felt strongly that there would have to be a person appointed to her position because she has such a full-time role. We put a question to Mike Thomas to help us calculate those things because he had expressed something to us early on that he would offer a breakdown for us. But then you came back and asked us for the duties to be divided. And I believe one of us went over to Mylene and had that conversation, but it didn't seem to change these votes. And I can't be more specific than that. Maybe Richard can, because I think he had that conversation.
I have something to say. I don't know if you can see my hand.
I think, are you next, Tony? Was it Richard?
I think Tony wanted to respond to my question.
Okay. Yeah, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The answer to that question I think we looked at was that we knew that these elected positions were actually working positions. So in other words, the assessor, treasurer, and auditor were actually doing assessor work, auditor work, and treasurer work. Portion of their FTE was management of personnel. So I presented that argument that if we were to combine those positions, you would still need to fill the FTEs of those positions that were actually actual work in the office, not just the management position. So there might be a small savings of 1/2 of an FTE of management, but that was not that much in money that I felt as a person discussing this, that it was enough value to the county at large to fill any other positions or to pay for an elected position if in fact the commission presents one and the voters agree to it. So I really don't think that there's a preponderance of cash created because you combine these three positions, because the work still has to be done, the actual work.
Okay. Maureen, Richard has his hand up again, and I'm going to ask the commission if we can go 15 minutes over this evening.
Okay, go ahead, Richard.
I guess I would say, and I probably sounded too negative when I made my first comments, but I still don't buy the argument. If you eliminate the treasurer's position, you save that salary. I don't, and I made this point when we were having the discussion, I don't necessarily buy the argument that you're going to have to hire another position to carry out those functions. When, if you remember back to Mylene's early presentation to us, she showed on her org chart what functions and people she thought would go to the auditor and what would go to the assessor. And if that happened, my point was where the reduction in cost savings might occur is that when those two people look at their span of control being increased, the number of people they have to supervise, then they would likely argue to the salary commission the next time around that they are underpaid. They need to be paid more. I think that's the more likely argument, not that you're going to immediately have to hire somebody to take over the functions that the treasurer was doing. Those would fall to the auditor and the assessor.
Thank you, but I think we agreed that we disagree on that one, Dick. Sorry.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, but I'm trying to explain the no vote and why I didn't agree.
I got it.
I also want to say that the assessor was very clear with us that he was at his limit. You know, there had been cutbacks, and he felt that it would be very difficult for him to take on additional staff and all of that. So there was a lot of consideration over all of this. And I think one of the things we were able to say is that it was hard to consolidate departments when none of them seemed to be having difficulties or emerging troubles or problems that would indicate it should happen. They were all doing their jobs and they're all completing their tasks. And it's a little hard to come in and do that. So anyway, that's just a part of our conversation. Go ahead.
I believe you had other motions there that you were going to cover too.
I know, I think Richard had something else he was going to say.
Just quickly, I want to add that while I'm speaking out about my no vote, I'm one of the people, remember, who proposed and feel very strongly when all of these go to the full commission, the things that get discussed first, I firmly believe, are the ones that were able to secure a majority vote from a subcommittee. So while I may have strong feelings about this, I do not think, and I would not argue, that this needs to go to the full commission as some sort of top issue.
Got it.
I'm gonna discuss a recommendation at the end of this on how we deal with these sorts of issues going forward.
Of course.
For conversation. But we also, in 1 minute, we have to go to public comment. I just want to put that out there.
Let me just say, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, let me just say that thank you, Dick. I really love this group. Our 6 members are very active, and I just, we've chatted about this at length, and I do appreciate all the input that this brought us to here. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone tried to be very considerate of this, all of these elected issues. I also want to just point out very quickly that Bob O'Connell came up with an idea. It was an elaborate idea and one that we rejected, but it was a wonderful thing that he did. He wrote it up. It was very clear. And I really appreciated that extra effort on his part. So that we also have the sheriff, which we have went around and around and around. We've had so many conversations about this. Go ahead, Bob, speak up.
I have to say that I felt very strongly that the sheriff ought to be switched to an appointed position. If only one was switched to an appointed position, it should be that one. And there are a whole bunch of reasons, not the least of which is that our next sheriff will be some sheriff deputies. It will be from the family. We will not make any kind of search to find the best possible sheriff for us. And there's other reasons why that shouldn't hold up. But I actually made the motion, which was seconded by Dick, to have the sheriff changed from elected to appointed. And then I voted aye, but for sake of unanimity, I changed my vote after. So I just wanted
to drove us crazy. He made us crazy.
I felt strongly about it, but the group, it was important to the group, so I switched. But
this was one that was not easy for everybody. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, and I just want to add that we spent a lot of time, and I thought it was becoming clear what the sentiment of the group was. And that's the reason I seconded, just to bring it to a vote,
Yes,
not because I had
that's right.
strong feelings about whether the sheriff should be elected or appointed.
Thank you.
So I know that you've only got one left, but we're at 5:51, and just out of respect for the public, I'd like to break and go to public comment. And
Thank
then
you.
we'll come back to this last point, and then we can have a couple more minutes discussion if that's okay with folks.
Thank you for letting us take it this far.
No, thank you for the presentation so far. I look forward to concluding it. Okay, any members of the public who would like to speak about any topics, well, any topics within our purview? We'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to speak, just turn on your video and unmute yourself. I see Ron, so why don't we start with you? Go ahead, Ron Metcalf. And if you would introduce yourself and say where you're from, please.
Oh yeah, Ron Metcalf, Lopez Island. And I understood I wasn't able to be here there was a presentation on ranked choice voting. Is that true today?
Yeah.
I wish I could have heard the presentation, but I also heard that it came out of committee is not being recommended. And I just was so surprised when I got the email from Sharon Abreu that there was a possibility and that we could actually do it. I was really excited. Not many things about county government really excite me, but this one did. And then I was so disappointed that I don't know what the arguments are for not recommending to go ahead with that, but that's my personal feeling. I thought it was exciting that it was a possibility, and I really hoped we were able to do it. So obviously I'm strongly in favor.
Thank you, Ron. Other members of the public care to comment? Rick?
This is Jim Dool.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I'd just like to make one suggestion. I've been through a number of different changes of how we voted on in this island on the 35 years I've been here. And by far the most transparent and the best way for us to have a chain of custody from the voter to the results is a paper ballot without going through a machine. Its algorithms can be changed because we never can find out exactly what those algorithms are. And I know it's horrible to go back to the old-fashioned paper vote, but I have been involved, like I say, with the voting here for 35 years, including the precinct levels where we met. We identified the person. We had a ballot count with a number on it so we could tear off and know exactly how many ballots we should have to count, and counted those ballots. And like I say, it was by far the most transparent, and we didn't have to worry about a machine doing some kind of algorithm in it, whether we push it through once or twice or whatever the case was. So I would like to recommend that as we're discussing voting, that at least be part of the consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Okay, I saw Rick Hughes. Thank you for being
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to, my name is Rick Hughes, Orcas Island, Washington. I just wanted to reach out and thank all of you who stepped up to serve. This is a really important task. The charter is a big passion of mine, and so I felt it was important to start paying attention to what's going on. So I appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick, very much. David Turnoy.
Hi, Kevin. No, I wasn't going to actually comment anything, but I just wanted to, as long as I'm here, put in my plug for ranked choice voting. I think that if we had had an opportunity to hear more from the Fair Vote people, they would have had answers to a lot of the things that this person Sharon brought up. I don't think her information is very up to date. I think there have been a lot of technological advances since the fiasco in Pierce County. And the Fair Vote people said that you don't need 2 ballots now, that our equipment is compatible. So ranked choice voting is just a great innovation that will take some of the vitriol out of campaigns, and it will make it so you don't feel like your vote is ever wasted. So just want to put my plug in for the CRC to continue looking at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other members of the public that would like to comment?
Hi, Kevin,
John.
could I go?
John, please go ahead.
I could just respond to Jim and the other people that spoke up in favor of ranked choice voting, that the notion in other policies, the paper ballot is a very important thing for provable election results. And that's completely compatible with ranked choice voting, just to be clear. You can go back to the ballots and do recounts. I'm sure Auditor Henley, if I remember her name correctly, there are details there to work through for sure, but it is entirely possible with a complete paper trail from voter to result.
Any other members of the public who would like to speak at this point in time? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I'm just toggling between the two pages here. Kyle, did you have something you wanted to add?
Can we just remind Mr. Metcalf that he can go back and see all of the video and consume this offline?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Kyle. I was going to say that earlier and I forgot. Yeah. So Ron, and for any member of the public, the whole presentation and all of our presentations are recorded, and they are all online on the county website, on the County Charter Review Commission page. So you can go to that page and see the presentation from today. Jane?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just wanted for Mr. Metcalf's further clarification. The subcommittee on elections, it is not that it voted against putting to the CRC the issue of ranked choice voting. The motion was not seconded to put the issue to the full CRC. The motion failed. So it was decided that this was an issue that we would let the full commission discuss. So just to be clear, okay? So, and that is minuted. Those minutes are available to the public. The meeting was recorded. That is also available to the public. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. That's an important distinction.
Is minuted a word?
It is now.
That's a cool word.
Absolutely, it's a word.
Wow, it's minuted.
I believe her.
She's Canadian, so she's honest.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Canadian and American.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So she's
Yeah.
half honest.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony, and then I'm going to try and move this on.
Since I was the chair of that subcommittee, I totally agree with Jane. I did send you a chat item on that as well. But we want to make sure that the public knows that it did not come up to a vote. So we did not vote it down or up. It just basically did not come to a vote.
It was an issue of non-action.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to close public comment, and I want to go back to the conclusion of the presentation from the elected versus appointed, and then I want to go into a brief budget discussion and then any new business.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. So the number 6 is, should the county clerk be appointed instead of elected? This is another one that we tousled about and wondered and thought, is this a place that we can save money? Is this a place that a position that could be appointed? The county clerk gave us a very strong presentation that indicated, again, checks and balances, and the scope of her work looked much better as an elected. And it took 5 ayes. So that's all I can say, unless anybody else wants to offer something here.
The water tastes good.
Hey, Jim, can you please mute?
Does anyone in our committee wish to respond to the county clerk position? I see Jane's hand.
I don't
Mr.
see
Chair?
any. So yeah, please, I'm sorry, I don't see everybody right now. So yeah, go ahead, Jane, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maureen, yes, I have a question. I mean, I'm really interested about, you know, the pros and cons of this, because I'm not feeling clear at all on why elected or why appointed. So it'd be great to hear just briefly what you discussed on this.
Well, what I can tell you is we haven't written up the findings. We've got findings to produce on all of these. And I think it'll be easier if we get to that, which we should be getting to in the next few weeks. That's going to be a big task because this is a big deal. These are big deals. And we want to be able to document the rationale behind all of this and before it goes to the council, the full commission. Number 7, if that's okay, if you can wait, Jane, because there's so much more to say. Number 7 is clearer language regarding minimum requirements for electeds. And Richard Grout did a beautiful paper combining the statutory requirements for some of the positions, particularly the assessor. And he's made a few very modest proposals for additional language. Randy has written an opinion, and basically his opinion says that yes, we can add language. So we are working with that right now, and we are going to be discussing that next week, next Monday. That's all I have to say, unless anyone wishes to add to it.
Looks like Bob and Tony and Janet all have questions.
How about Bob?
Yeah, I do have some concern, which I noted with the committee about actually nailing down what those requirements are, and then nailing down who is responsible for making sure that those requirements are followed. Initially when a person turns in their notice that they're going to be running, in my opinion, that person ought to also turn in some listing of how he or she complies with what the qualifications are. And then the person receiving it or someone in that office needs to get on the phone, call and check those things out. Anyway, that's
So
something
Bob,
I believe needs to be in the charter.
So I think it does too. And I think that's part of the question that went to Randy, and that response we'll be getting that response.
Okay. Yeah.
And now, Tony, I think you were next.
Yeah, you had Tony and then Janet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This also was a big discussion, and I think Dick Grout did a tremendous job putting together some points. What we wanted to make sure, and I'm speaking we, doesn't mean everybody, but what we wanted to make sure is that whatever the qualifications are going to need to be something that's easily verifiable. For example, in RCW, the prosecuting attorney has to have passed the bar exam. That's easily verifiable by somebody at the counter when they come in to apply for a position like that or be a candidate. And somebody also recommended that maybe we can have a list of things. Did you do accounting, or did you spend any time in the assessor's office, or those kind of things? Those are easily verifiable. But Randy came back with us that sometimes some of those things are not that easily verifiable because length of time or quality of work or position in a particular area, it was difficult to verify. But so we're still working on it, and I think with the brains that we have on this group, we should probably come up with some really good stuff.
We will prevail.
You've got Janet and then Liz.
Janet?
Yeah, so I was just going to sum it up, kind of this discussion from the fantastic report by elected versus appointed. The qualification discussion notwithstanding, it seems like the one change that you're proposing to the Charter Review Commission and to the charter is the term limits. It seems like everything else is as it exists. Am I correct? Just to sum it up.
Looks this way, but we're not done yet.
Okay. As of today, that's what it looked like to me. I just wanted to make sure I was following.
This is the report for today, but we're not
Okay,
done
great.
yet.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you.
You had
Who's
Liz.
next?
Liz had
Hi,
hand
Liz.
up.
Yeah, I had a question for Dick. You said something that kind of passed by, and I didn't know if it had weight or was really a side thought about that the earlier discussions got better weight or the late ones. What were you referencing there?
I don't recall saying anything like that.
Something about I didn't know if it was just a matter of that early on you were able to give more time to the issue, and then as you got down the list, and maybe I misheard, which would be fine. That'd be,
No, I didn't say anything like that because that's not something I thought.
Okay, well, Well,
The first things we
creative,
voted on were the easiest.
creative listening going on over here then. Thank
Maybe
you.
you should be thinking about it. No, I don't know.
Other
Is that-
questions? Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I have a question.
Please.
Or maybe it's a statement or something to consider as you think about qualifications. And I raised this before. I've thought a lot about qualifications for elected officials over the years, mainly wondering how was I ever got elected. But that in all seriousness, I wouldn't want to see us get too prescriptive on qualifications, because so much of being an elected official is your ability to work with others, your ability to create a team, and so on. And even with I will call them the professional elected officials we have, like auditor, assessor, treasurer, and so on, where you definitely need somebody who knows those departments and has certain skill sets in those areas. What's more important is that they be able to build a great team, which, the greatest skill anybody can have is know what you don't know. And then you surround yourself with people who complement your weaknesses. And so I brought it up before, but we had a chair of our Senate Transportation Committee in Washington State who was a hairdresser before she was elected. And then she was making decisions for a multi-billion-dollar budget and deciding whether or not, the ferries were going to be funded and we're going to get all of that. And she did an outstanding job. And I wasn't there in the beginning when she first came on board, so I don't know what the learning curve was. She wasn't chair of transportation overnight. But I think people have different skill sets. And so I just get concerned that we would get too prescriptive. I like the idea of qualifications, but I don't want us to get too prescriptive. I also question, and I know Randy's been involved in the conversation, but the legality of how prescriptive we can get in accordance with our state constitution and laws. So you have hands by
Well,
Tony.
I just want, before I get to them, I just want to say one thing. I totally agree, but the qualities that you're talking about are awfully hard to pick up. And sometimes they don't come across in a campaign or in an actual interview. They're very hard, they're very obscure. And if we're lucky, we find a person who has the leadership skills. The things that Richard has recommended in his proposals are very logical and reasonable. They are not anything that wouldn't really fly. I'm sorry, go ahead, Richard.
I just want to respond to Kevin and anybody else who was wondering. If you read that thing I submitted to the subcommittee, that wasn't really my thoughts. And you need to read the email that I sent with it, because that explains this. But briefly, I asked each elected official, I talked to every one of them, and I said, if you ruled the world, what if anything would you add or establish as minimum qualifications? I took what they gave me, and in a number of cases, I thought it was too prescriptive. And I also wanted each office to be, roughly similar what we would require. So I tried to narrow it down to the kinds of things that would be fairly easily verifiable and that wouldn't create too narrow a straitjacket for who could get appointed.
Thank you, Dick. You've got Tony and then Jane, and then if possible, I'd really like to try and move us on.
Thank you,
fine.
Mr.
Tony,
Chair.
go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, I do agree totally. I started, this is the beauty about collaborative efforts. I started the conversation in that subcommittee about qualifications as to say, the electorate can tell who the voters are. We have a very smart electorate in this county. We have educated electorate, so they can tell if somebody is pulling, whatever. But I think so I did change my mind a bit, but only to the point where the qualification has to be something that's easily verifiable. It cannot be a lengthy essay or something like that. It has to be, and I think Dick is the work that he's done has already narrowed it down to a kind of a line item of what the qualification is that could be easily verified. According to what Bob said, somebody could get on the phone and say, did Joe so or Jane so, did they actually work in that office? Those kind of things that are easily verifiable. So
You're right.
now at a point in the conversation that I'm okay with it.
Okay, good.
Okay, so is Jay next?
Yeah, James was your
Yeah.
last one.
Yeah,
Yes.
just a quick comment for consideration by this committee as they continue the deliberations on this. I would put in a plug for being mindful of the importance that I think many of us are appreciating with regard to diversity and inclusion issues within our county. And so, you know, requirements or qualifications that could diminish the potential for, you know, more diverse, you know, representation of peoples applying for positions or running for elections. So just a request that diversity and inclusion be considered in when you're in your discussion of qualifications, and recognizing that the more stringent those qualifications get, you can begin to make it difficult for people to apply or run. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. That's good. Okay,
Maureen,
Kevin, we're done.
And Maureen and committee, thank you so much for your work, for your suggestions so far, and for the presentation. I found it myself, personally, I found it very informative and really thought-provoking too, and actually kind of moved me on a couple of issues as well. So thank you. I very quickly, before we get into the budget, and we've got 3 minutes left, so this is going to be tight. I just wanted to briefly mention kind of the process idea, and this has gone around a little bit, but Dick has mentioned today and on a previous call this idea that issues that where a subcommittee had taken action either for or against something, or I shouldn't say against, but had taken action for, decided not to move something, that those would come up later in our discussions. I feel the same way. I did want to suggest, however, that if, and this is a good time to bring it up because some of you, several of you actually have raised issues with regard to thoughts that you wanted one of these positions to either be consolidated or made appointed versus elected. I would like to encourage you to do some homework and maybe even come back to the commission with an idea. So if it's the clerk, if it's the sheriff, it's a consolidation of the assessor, look into that. And I would encourage you also to talk to members, most definitely talk to members of the committee involved. So on this subject, it would be elections and appointed or another committee, so that you have their information and their deliberations and thought process as well. And then what I would suggest, and this is a suggestion for you guys, so you guys tell me if you agree, that if there's a handful of commissioners who want to revisit a topic, then we will have further discussion. If one or two members want to revisit a topic, I don't think that that warrants the time of the full commission. I'm not suggesting that it would take a majority to have us have a discussion on something. I'm saying literally a handful, like 5 to 7 members or something. But we'd like to see that there's at least a group of commissioners that want to revisit a subject before we start diving back into it going forward. Does that make sense to folks?
Yes, to me.
Okay, I see Tony, Tom, and Bob. My budget presentation is going to be bumped to third meeting, it looks like. Tony, Tom, Bob, please.
Well, this is time for me to express a concern. I belong to 3 subcommittees, one of which I was the chair and 2 of which I'm a participant. Out of 2 committees, we came up with a decision or no decision to change things. And now we are hearing that a handful of commissioners can bring it up to the larger group. I understand the concept and I do understand the process behind it, but it seems to me that there's always going to be an item at some point that is going to have a handful of CRC members that would want to bring forward to the commission if they don't like what the subcommittee has agreed to. Again, I don't have any horse in any of these, dog in any of these races, in the elections points or the elected and appointed. But I'm just concerned that if we are at a point where we're going to extend our meeting times to things that did not pass through committee to the larger group and discuss them at length, I hark back to what Dick Grout said some time ago. If each committee or subcommittee brings an item or 2 forward, those need to be the top of that list. And if there's something else to be considered, that should be kind of a secondary item on that list. We don't have a lot of time as a group to bring forward to the larger group what 5 or 6 members of the CRC would rather talk about, that we bring that forward. And I apologize if I'm saying anything that's offensive, but I'm just trying to say that, you know what, we need to set a certain limit of what needs to move forward if it did not come from the committee or the subcommittee.
Yeah, so I thought I just said in my preamble that those would be secondary topics. So just to clarify what I said 5 minutes ago, that I think those are secondary topics. We're not going to bring those up right away. The second thing, though, just to clarify, the full CRC votes on recommendations to the council and the public, not the subcommittees. So if you want an item to go forward to the public, this entire commission needs to vote upon it, period. The subcommittees have no authority whatsoever. It's like Bill Apple and I actually had this conversation, and it was attuned to, if one council member on our county council wants to do something, bummer. You have zero authority until you get a second vote. So this commission needs a majority vote to move anything. So what I'm saying is, if there's a subject that has a lot of traction, we should discuss it as a full commission, even if it's been voted the opposite direction by a subcommittee. And then at some point, somebody can just say, look, I call the question. And if there's 10 members of this commission that say, I don't want to talk about this anymore, it's dead. And we could do that to begin with. But the way I'm thinking is exactly what you and Dick just said, which is topics where a subcommittee has already discussed them. I think we need to put those are secondary topics. Let's get through the ones where a committee is recommending that the commission take action, and then we go through them and we look at those. But I will tell you, on elections, I've had a handful of commissioners approach me and say that they have an opposite opinion of where the subcommittee went to. I don't know if there's 9 or 10 members who feel that way, but I know that there's at least some. And so I believe it will probably warrant additional conversation in the future, which began today with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do understand the logic. I'm just concerned about the process moving forward. I get the logic.
And frankly, Tony, the reason I'm bringing this up is so am I. And I'm trying to juggle this and figure out a way to, you've got one opinion, another commissioner has another, and I'm trying to find a happy medium there. And you guys aren't going to like my final thing tonight that I have to share with you.
Well, let's keep going.
So we've got Tom and then Bob, I think it was.
Oh.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully agree with Tony. In fact, I think to put a proposed charter discussion in front of the CRC that has not gone to committee and passed, the idea of putting it on the agenda needs to be voted on by the full CRC.
And
next week, if that has traction, I'm prepared to make a motion on that next week.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to do a budget discussion tonight, but what I am going to say for next week is that we need to meet twice. I think I was going to say we go to 3 hours, but I don't think 3 hours. First of all, I think 3 hours is death by Zoom. And so but with the amount of time we have left and the amount of discussion points that we have, and also I hope that some of the subcommittees are starting to wind down. And so maybe it's not next week, maybe it's the following week. But I would like to put out there for us to consider that we start meeting twice a week for 2 hours. Because I am starting to get worried about the amount of work that we have to do.
Yeah.
And I just think we've got to get our jobs done. And so, and I also see that some subcommittees are starting to wind down. And so what I would like to say is that we should, I will put out an email of this and get your guys' input. And if enough of you disagree, then we won't do it. But I do believe that the work is starting to mount up, and it's not just that things are being revisited, it is that recommendations are coming from subcommittees. And frankly, I think we could have spent even more time on the conversation today from the Elections and Appointed Committee. And maybe Tony gotten to your point, or Tom to your point. We could have gotten to a point where we said, okay, are there anybody on the commission who wants to revisit this topic? And if 2 people said yes and the rest said no, issue's dead. we need to get to a point where we can start making decisions like that as a full commission. And so looking ahead at our full timeline, I think we're getting close to that time. And so I'd like to put that out there as a discussion topic, and you guys can all email me and then we can share it. And so with that, I'm actually thinking that maybe next week we do not go to 2 meetings. It would have to be 2 weeks out. So we have time to think about it, but I'd like folks to think about it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I see Patty and then Kyle and then, oh, I'm sorry, Olivia and then Patty and then Kyle.
No, not me. I was only gonna say, I gotta go.
Okay. Yeah. Olivia?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to reiterate what Kevin was saying, I completely agree that we need to be wrapping up our committees, and everyone was given fair warning over 2 weeks ago that we needed to start wrapping up our topics. And so I hope that we can all come together on this so we don't have too many Zoom calls. And so if the committee leads can wrap up their topics and understand that they need to get through the material in the next 2 weeks, it's going to really help us, move forward with the process.
Okay. Kyle and then Janet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we far enough along to know right now which committees speak next week or who reports next week? Is that established?
I think I know that, but I don't know it right now. My brain's fried. Olivia's nodding.
Operations.
Operations is next week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
Ready to go. Ready to go.
Okay, so Janet?
Do you know how many speakers are coming up in the next few weeks? Because that takes a lot of time out of our meetings, and it's great to hear from the speakers, but I'm just wondering how many more speakers we have ahead of us.
I think Catherine or Olivia, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we only had one more, and I will say up front that he's a very senior elected official, and we'd asked him a while back, and it got bumped according to his calendar.
Is it Obama? Is Obama coming?
No.
Really?
It is
I sent him an email. He didn't respond.
The Snohomish County executive. And I do think his presentation would still be informative to us. I will say that I wish it had been sooner because it would have been more informative before. And we're starting to get into the point where we just need to work. So your point is well made.
That's my point is,
my point is, my hope is no more presentations. Okay, any other comments?
Just a question.
Yeah, please, Tony.
So just a point, what is the executive from Snohomish County going to be discussing?
He originally was asked to talk about their county charter process, as well as many of the decisions they made with regard to their equity and justice issues that he was intimately involved with, which is something that will be coming back to this commission for a larger discussion. And so I actually still think that his point of view could be relevant. And also, like I said, we invited him, it got delayed. I'm reluctant to tell him, just kidding. Tony, thank you. My thought was, because it's still a very hot topic for us and a big issue for us coming up from a subcommittee, it might still be relevant. So that was my thought. Okay, Liz?
I want to put out an probably unpopular opinion that I don't want to see urgency override quality of the product we put out there. And I know the 3 committees I've been on have been pushing nonstop. So nobody's dragging their feet. And I just don't think it's what we're working on is too important to sacrifice doing a good job.
I totally agree, Liz. And I don't want any of us to rush. And one of the other things, though, is I am finding that these full commission conversations are more and more valuable. And when the subcommittees are coming back and the rest of us hear what you've been talking about, and then we reflect upon it. And so the reason I'm saying 2 more meetings isn't to necessarily as much rush the subcommittees, but also to say, I think we need more time to start coming to conclusions amongst ourselves, to Tony's point, so the full commission can take a vote on things.
And as much as I'm not a fan of Zoom time, I'm a fan of going to 2 meetings to do, really represent what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. Any new business? Okay. The final thing I will say is I will go ahead and have Catherine share our budget as is with you, so you can look at that, and then we can discuss it, not via email, but next week it will be on the agenda. Maybe I'll make it first. We are very tight on our budget. We also just got a hit that was totally unexpected. The county has billed us $1,500 for our Microsoft's emails. So that's a whole month of Catherine's time out of the budget and it just showed up. And I said I didn't approve it, and I was told bummer. So we also, though, are still hoping to bring on a second person, because Catherine will not be with us for periods of next month, this month and next month. And as we shared with you when we went for the second amount of money, and the request of the county council was that we would have somebody who would be able to fill that void when Catherine's gone, but also help us with drafting our recommendations at the end. So that's what the budget is that's before you. And we'll look at it next week. And so thank you. Sorry we went over tonight. It probably won't be the last time, but I will try and make it close to the last time. So with that, thank you, Bill. I was just going to ask, Bill's awesome. Thank you. I had a motion in a second. We're out of here. Have a great night. To the public, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Good night, all.
Good
Hi,
night, all.
everybody. Thank you for being here.
Bonsoir.
Catherine, are you going to stop recording?
Yeah.